Imagine your English grammar is like essentially flawless.
Mhm.
You can read complex articles, you can draft multi-million-dollar business proposals.
Yeah, you feel totally confident.
Exactly. You can even navigate a noisy pub in a foreign city without breaking a sweat. You feel like you finally, conquered the language.
Right, you're at the top of the mountain.
But then, out of nowhere, your phone rings.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's an unknown number, or maybe worse, it's an important client.
Yeah.
You pick it up, and suddenly your heart rate just spikes.
Sweating palms, the whole 9 yards.
Your mind just goes completely blank. I mean, it's a phenomenon that strikes fear into the hearts of even the most advanced, highly proficient speakers.
It really is. It's the ultimate high wire act. I mean, we spend years building up linguistic confidence, right? Only to have it just completely shatter.
Completely.
Because the moment we're forced to just stare at a blank wall and communicate using nothing but, a piece of plastic pressed against our ear.
It's terrifying.
It is. We are looking at a communication landscape that completely unmoors people.
So today, we are unpacking the absolute final boss of language mastery, the advanced English phone conversation.
A final boss. I love that.
And the stack of source material we have for our deep dive today highlights this really surprising truth right out of the gate. Even now, in the age of asynchronous texting.
And voice notes.
Right. Voice notes you can carefully delete and re-record. Or video chats packed with high-definition visual cues. Even with all of that, the traditional voice-only phone call remains the ultimate high-stakes test of your proficiency.
It really does. It causes intense anxiety for almost everyone.
It does. So our mission today is to figure out the mechanics of this anxiety, right? We're going to unpack the hidden psychology of this pure audio panic.
And we'll reveal the underlying 5-stage structural skeleton that, governs every single call.
Plus, we want to equip you with native-level strategies for navigating really high-pressure situations. Everything from, aggressive conference calls to hostile customer service disputes.
It's a survival guide, basically.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the psychology itself. Why does the simple act of saying hello into a receiver feel like such a monumental cognitive task?
Well, to understand the panic, we really have to look at the biology of how we process language, because it's fundamentally multisensory.
Meaning we use more than just our ears.
Right. When you're conversing in person, you aren't just listening. You have an entire arsenal of what the research calls visual crutches.
Visual crutches, so things like hand gestures and body language.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if someone points to a chair and says an unfamiliar word, my brain just kind of maps it. I immediately know what the word means without needing a dictionary.
That's definitely part of it. The environmental context does a massive amount of heavy lifting for our vocabulary. But it actually goes much deeper into subconscious processing.
Really? Like how?
Well, in a face-to-face conversation, you are actively lip reading.
Wait, lip reading?
Yeah.
I mean, I always assumed that was a specialized skill, primarily utilized by people with hearing impairments. You're saying everyone does this?
Everyone. Cognitive science shows that almost all of us subconsciously integrate the visual shape of a speaker's mouth with the auditory signal.
Just to figure out what they said.
Exactly. To decide what sound we just heard. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the McGurk effect.
The McGurk effect. Okay, how does that work?
So, if your eyes see a mouth making a ga shape,
right,
but your ears hear the audio of a ba sound, your brain will actually fuse them together and trick you into hearing a completely different sound, like da.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
It is. Your visual cortex is constantly overriding and assisting your auditory cortex, especially when you're processing a second language or, standing in a really noisy room.
That is incredible. So on a phone call, that entire visual processing system is it's violently shut down.
Precisely. We are flying blind. All of those subconscious crutches are just kicked away.
You're plunged into this pure audio environment.
Yeah, and without those context clues, your brain has to work twice as hard to process the auditory input. Then translate it, formulate a coherent response, translate that back into English.
All in real time.
Right. And deliver it all within a window of about 1 to 2 seconds.
Before the silence starts to feel painfully awkward.
Exactly. The cognitive load is staggering.
And we haven't even factored in the actual sound quality yet. Because the acoustic environment of a phone call is notoriously hostile.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's not like listening to a high-fidelity studio recording,
Well,
right?
not at all. The audio degradation is severe. We're dealing with digital compression algorithms that literally strip out audio frequencies.
Just to save bandwidth on cellular networks, I assume.
Right. Human speech contains a massive range of frequencies, but a phone line just chops off the high and low ends.
Which makes certain letters hard to hear.
Exactly. It frequently drops the crisp consonant sounds, like the difference between an F and an S, or a P and a B.
Add in static, unpredictable cell tower handoffs, echoes.
And background noise. Your brain is left trying to solve a linguistic puzzle with a third of the pieces completely missing.
Honestly, I have a colleague whose phone voice is so weirdly metallic and compressed. I genuinely didn't recognize him the first time he called me.
It changes your voice entirely.
So the environment is hostile, the cognitive load is maxed out, and the visual net is gone. And this panic we feel, it actually has a clinical name now, right?
Yes, telephobia.
Telephobia.
Yeah, telephobia is a legitimate, widely documented anxiety. And it's increasingly common.
Especially among younger demographics, I'd imagine. People raised in an ecosystem of asynchronous communication.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how you communicate most of the day. With a text message or a Slack ping, you can draft your thought.
Edit it, overthink the punctuation.
Delete the whole thing and try again.
Exactly.
But a phone call demands immediate, unfiltered cognitive performance. You cannot backspace a spoken sentence.
But, okay, if texting and video calls are so prevalent now, aren't phone calls just an outdated torture device? Like, why even put ourselves through this cognitive marathon?
That's a fair question.
Right, if I can just send an email, why force my brain to process degraded audio in real time?
What's fascinating here is that the research explicitly argues the exact opposite.
Really?
Yeah, because the phone call strips away your safety net and forces your brain to carry that massive cognitive load. Mastering this pure audio environment actually functions as a hyper-accelerator.
A hyper-accelerator for your overall language skills.
Yes.
Huh. It's almost like cognitive resistance training. You put the heavy weights on so that when you take them off, everything else feels incredibly light.
That is the perfect analogy. If you can confidently navigate a complex business negotiation purely through the subtle nuances of audio tone and pacing.
Your listening skills just dramatically sharpen.
Exactly. Your ability to think on your feet becomes agile. Once you conquer the phone, every subsequent face-to-face interaction you have will feel entirely effortless.
Because you've trained your brain to process the language under the most extreme conditions.
You've survived the crucible.
So the panic is justified, but the practice is essential, which means we need a strategy to lower that cognitive load. And looking at the sources, the most powerful tool is recognizing that we aren't actually navigating a totally chaotic landscape.
Right. It feels chaotic, but it's not.
Every call, no matter how intimidating, is built on a highly predictable structural skeleton.
This is the turning point from anxiety to strategy. The overarching universal truth about phone communication in English is that every single call is constructed of the exact same 5 stages.
Whether you're ordering takeout from a noisy restaurant or negotiating a corporate merger across 3 time zones.
Same 5 stages.
Let's break those down. The 5-stage roadmap. We have the opening, the small talk, the main content, the closing, and the goodbye. On the surface, that sounds almost too simple. I think most people intuitively know that conversations have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So how does formalizing this basic list actually help someone who is sweating bullets waiting for the dial tone to connect?
Because it acts as a cognitive safety net. Think about taking a high-stakes, standardized test.
Okay.
Even if you don't know exactly what the specific questions will be, simply knowing the format of the exam, knowing that section 1 is multiple choice, Section 2 is short answer.
That massively reduces your test anxiety.
Exactly. You know how to pace your mental energy.
So it prevents you from getting overwhelmed by the entirety of the call all at once.
Right. On a phone call, if you know you're currently in the small talk phase, your brain does not have to panic about delivering complex business data yet.
You can just focus on the small talk.
Exactly. You anticipate the rhythm of the interaction. You know what's expected of you right then, and you know what phase is coming next.
But the reality is that a call to my best friend is fundamentally different from a call to, say, the IRS or a tech support hotline. How does this universal 5-stage map account for those wildly different scenarios?
Because the DNA of the call remains identical, but the proportions of those 5 stages shift drastically.
Depending on the context.
Right. Consider a call to a close friend. The opening might be 2 seconds long, just a casual hey.
And the small talk phase is huge.
It might consume 90% of the entire call. You chat for 45 minutes about your week, your family, your hobbies.
And the main content.
The main content might just be a 10-second pivot. Anyway, do you want to grab dinner on Thursday? Followed by a quick closing and goodbye.
Right. And if I'm calling my internet provider because my router is broken.
The proportions flip completely. The small talk phase shrinks to almost 0.
Yeah, I'm definitely not asking the tech support agent how their weekend was.
Exactly. The main content phase dominates 90% of the interaction as you troubleshoot the router. Then you have a highly structured closing where they issue a ticket number and a standard goodbye.
But the critical takeaway is that all 5 stages still occur.
Always. You still have to open, you still have to close.
The counter-argument to that, though, is rigidity. Doesn't sticking to a 5-step formula make you sound like an automated bot?
People worry about that.
Right. If I'm consciously thinking initiating phase 2, small talk protocols, I feel like I'm going to lose all natural conversational flow.
That's a common fear, but it really misunderstands the purpose of the structure. The structure is a map, not a script.
A map. Yeah.
You are still the one driving the vehicle, you're choosing the specific route, and you're controlling the speed. The map simply prevents you from driving off a cliff or getting hopelessly lost in a tangent.
It provides a reliable container for your fluency.
A container for your fluency. I love that phrasing.
So let's zoom in on the very beginning of that map. Let's put a magnifying glass on the very first thing that happens when the phone rings. Because honestly, the psychological tone of the entire call is usually dictated in the first 10 seconds.
Without a doubt.
The opening and the immediate transition into the small talk minefield.
The opening is where expectations are instantly set. And in English-speaking cultures, there are highly specific, albeit unwritten, rules about how this needs to happen.
Divided by personal versus professional context, right?
Primarily, yes.
In a personal context, I just pick up and say, hello, right? I mean, with caller ID, I usually know exactly who's calling before I even answer.
Today, yes. In a personal context, answering with hello, utilizing a slightly rising intonation, is standard.
Like hello.
Exactly. The rising pitch acoustically signals, I am here, the line is connected, and I am waiting to hear who you are. And as you mentioned, caller ID has made American English highly casual.
Yeah, if I see my friend's name, I just answer with yeah or hey.
And that is entirely culturally acceptable.
But if we look at historical media or older British films, people used to answer the phone in a totally different way.
Oh, the number recitation.
Yeah, they would pick up the receiver and loudly recite a string of numbers. What was the psychology behind that?
That is such a fascinating linguistic artifact of analog technology. In British English, particularly before digital caller ID, it was standard to pick up the receiver and state your geographic phone number, like 456-7890.
Why on earth would you recite your own number to the person calling you?
Because early telephone exchanges were manual. They were highly prone to misrouting calls. By stating your number immediately, you were confirming to the caller that the physical switchboard had successfully quested them to the correct geographic location.
Oh, before they started blurting out private information.
Precisely. That specific practice has largely died out with digital routing, but the formality remains.
Right.
Today, older generations or more formal individuals in the UK might still answer a home phone with John speaking, identifying themselves immediately rather than using a vague hello.
But if we pivot to a modern business setting, answering your desk phone with a casual hello or yeah is like a massive professional misstep.
It is a fatal error in corporate communication. In a professional context, the opening must be highly structured to project competence.
So what's the standard protocol if you're receiving a business call?
You greet, identify your company, identify yourself, and immediately offer assistance. Good morning, Tech Solutions, Blake speaking. How may I help you?
That sets a very specific tone.
It achieves three things instantly. It establishes a professional tone, confirms the caller hasn't misdialed, and personalizes the corporate interaction.
That makes total sense when you're receiving the call. But what if you are the one dialing?
Initiated.
Initiating the momentum always feels significantly harder because you're interrupting their day. You have to break through their current focus. What is the architecture of a perfect business opening when you are the caller?
The research outlines a precise four-step sequence that highly proficient speakers use almost subconsciously. First, the time-appropriate greeting. Good morning.
Okay. Second, clear identification of yourself and your organization. This is Sarah Jenkins from Acme Corporation. Third, the immediate statement of your purpose. I'm calling regarding the proposal we discussed last week. And fourth, and this is the absolute most critical psychological pivot, the check for availability. Is this a good time to talk?
Is this a good time to talk? It seems so simple, but as a language learner, my instinct is to lean heavily into apologies. I feel like I'm trespassing on their time.
And that is the major psychological trap. You will constantly hear non-native speakers open a business call by saying, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're incredibly busy today. I feel terrible for interrupting.
I have definitely done that. It feels polite. Why is that approach so destructive?
Because while your intention is politeness, the psychological signaling in a Western business context is disastrous. Excessive apologizing instantly frames you as subordinate.
It makes you sound unconfident. Unconfident in the value of your own communication. And frankly, it wastes precious seconds of the other person's time. A phone call is a standard, expected business tool. You do not need to beg for forgiveness for utilizing it.
So asking, is this a good time to talk, acts as a confident equalizer.
Exactly. It perfectly balances respect for their schedule with the inherent confidence that your call is valuable and necessary. You're offering them agency.
And if they actually are busy?
If they say no, you simply execute a polite reschedule. No problem at all. When would be a better time for me to call back? It's clean, efficient, and maintains your professional leverage.
That gets us directly to the next phase, which is the small talk. And I view small talk as like the lobby of a corporate building.
I like that.
You have to pass through the lobby to get to the actual office where the real work happens. You can't just beam directly into the office. That's trespassing. It's socially jarring.
Right.
But you also don't want to bring your sleeping bag and live in the lobby forever. You have to know how to navigate the space and gracefully exit into the main content.
That analogy perfectly captures the social utility of small talk, and the architecture of that lobby changes dramatically depending on the cultural expectations of the person you're calling. The sources heavily emphasize the contrast between US and UK small talk protocols.
Let's explore that divide. Say I'm calling an American supplier in New York. How does that lobby function?
In American corporate culture, small talk is viewed as a necessary but highly efficient social lubricant. It's expected, but the clock is ticking the moment it begins.
So keep it fast.
Very fast. It usually consists of a quick rhythmic volley. How are you? I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you? Good, thanks.
And you might throw in a single observation, right? Like, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, or I see you guys are getting a lot of snow over there. But the unwritten rule is that within 30 to 60 seconds, you must transition to business. The warmth must be genuine but brief. American business culture prioritizes time as a tangible asset.
Now, let's say that supplier is based in London. Do I use the exact same 30-second approach?
If you do, you risk sounding abrasive or overly transactional. British business culture generally requires a slightly more extended stay in the lobby.
A bit more social cushioning.
Exactly.
Hmm.
There's a much higher cultural emphasis on politeness formulas and indirect communication to build rapport before making demands. You're expected to spend more time discussing neutral topics.
Like the weather.
The weather is the classic example, but also the journey to the office or general pleasantries before gently meandering toward the actual purpose of the call.
So you really have to soften the ground before you plant the business seed.
Precisely. Now, this is heavily industry dependent. A British investment banker might be just as brief and aggressive as a Wall Street trader. But as a general cultural baseline, British calls require more social cushioning.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me regarding the mechanics of small talk. The sources point out that you can't just passively endure it.
No, you cannot.
If someone asks you how your weekend was, you can't just say fine and stare blankly at the wall waiting for them to bring up the budget.
A one-word answer with no follow-up is a conversational dead end. It violates the unwritten social contract of the phone call. Small talk requires active reciprocation.
It's a tennis match.
It is. If they hit the ball over the net with, "How have you been?" you can't just catch the ball and put it in your pocket. You must hit it back. "I've been well, staying incredibly busy with the Q3 rollout. How are things on your end?"
You're actively proving that you are engaged.
Yes, in the human element of the interaction.
But eventually we have to leave the lobby. How do we open the door to the office and start the main content without jarring the listener? Because if we're chatting about the weather and I suddenly say, the budget is cut by 10%, it feels like physical whiplash.
You avoid that whiplash by using explicit transition phrases. These are the verbal keys that unlock the office door.
Like what?
Phrases like, "So the reason I'm calling is," or "I wanted to touch base with you today about," or even a slightly more casual, "So anyway, I wanted to follow up on the email I sent."
They act as a psychological gear shift.
Exactly. They mentally prepare the listener that the social portion of the call has officially concluded, and cognitive focus is now required.
Okay, so we've survived the opening. We navigated the small talk lobby, acknowledging the cultural nuances. Now we're in the room.
This brings us to the main content phase.
The meat of the conversation.
Right. And specifically, managing the chaos of complex information without visual aids. We're delivering the hard data. How do we ensure our message actually lands when we can't point to a slide deck?
The absolute core strategy here is relentless structural clarity. Because you can't use your hands to gesture and you can't point to a chart on a whiteboard, your words have to do all the heavy lifting.
They have to organize the data in the listener's mind.
Yes. And the most effective technique to achieve this is explicit signposting.
Signposting, meaning giving them verbal bullet points before you start explaining the details.
Exactly. Instead of launching into a messy, unstructured 10-minute monologue where the listener has to guess what's important, you preface your argument by giving them the architectural blueprint. So I'd say something like, there are 3 primary issues I want to discuss with you today.
Right. First, the budget constraints. Second, the revised timeline. And third, the staffing shortages.
You are essentially building a mental filing cabinet for them.
You build the cabinet, and then as you speak, you place your arguments into the correct folders. Moving on to the second point, the timeline.
That seems like it would require a really controlled pace.
It requires a moderate, highly controlled pace. If you let your nerves dictate your speaking speed and you rush through the information, those mental folders collapse into a jumbled mess, and the listener retains nothing.
But let's flip the perspective. What if you're on the receiving end? You're listening to a supplier, and they are not using signposts. They're rambling, the data is complex, and you feel yourself getting totally lost.
That happens all the time.
How do you stop the train and ask for clarification without derailing the whole conversation or, sounding unintelligent?
The research highlights a critical, high-level executive skill called paraphrasing back. This is your ultimate tool for real-time clarification. You never, ever wait until the end of a 10-minute monologue to admit you lost the thread 5 minutes ago.
So you jump in.
You interject gracefully and summarize what you believe you just heard using your own words.
So I would say something like, just to make sure I'm following you correctly, you're saying that the timeline has been pushed to Q3, but the budget allocation remains identical.
That is textbook paraphrasing back.
Yeah.
And it serves two vital psychological functions. First, it immediately catches miscommunications before they compound into disastrous errors.
Right, catching it early.
And second, it deeply validates the speaker. It proves to them that you aren't just passively hearing their voice, you're actively processing their logic.
And during this entire main content phase, you should be taking notes, right?
Always. You must be writing down the action items because it's standard protocol to summarize those notes aloud during the closing phase to guarantee total alignment.
That structural clarity makes perfect sense for a one-on-one call. But I want to throw a massive wrench into the works. What happens when we scale this up?
Conference calls.
Yes. What happens when you're on a multi-person conference call? To me, an audio-only conference call is like a radio talk show where every single listener has a microphone and a mute button and nobody can see each other's faces.
It is pure auditory chaos.
You have absolutely no idea who is about to take a breath, who is leaning forward to speak, or who is rolling their eyes.
Conference calls are uniquely challenging exactly because of that absence of back-channeling cues. In a physical meeting room, we use a complex symphony of nonverbal signals to manage turn-taking.
We make eye contact, we adjust our posture.
We open our mouth slightly before we speak. On an audio bridge, all of those turn-yielding cues vanish. You're navigating the flow completely blind. The first ironclad rule of surviving this environment is relentless self-identification.
You mean announcing your name every time you unmute?
Yes. In a room of 5 or 10 disembodied voices, you cannot assume everyone instantly recognizes your subtle vocal timbre, especially through compressed audio.
So before I make a point, I anchor my voice.
Right. This is David. I wanted to add to that, or Sarah here, just to build on what John just said.
It attaches your intellectual contribution to your specific identity.
Exactly. It provides instant clarity.
But how do you forcefully interrupt someone who just won't stop talking? We all know the type, the person who filibusters the meeting. In person, you can raise a hand. On the phone, how do you hijack the microphone without coming across as a hostile jerk?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, managing verbal flow on a multi-person call isn't just a language proficiency skill. It's a profound marker of executive presence.
Oh, absolutely.
You cannot politely wait for a perfectly silent 5-second pause to interject, because with an aggressive speaker, that pause will literally never arrive. You have to hunt for the micropause.
Micropause. The fraction of a second when they have to inhale oxygen.
Exactly. Human beings have to breathe. When they take that micropause, you deploy a polite but incredibly firm interjection phrase. You don't ask for permission. You assertively claim the floor.
Give me the exact phrasing. What are the tools for that?
You use phrases like, "Can I just jump in here for a second?" Or, "If I could just add one vital point to that."
That is a great perspective, and I also think we need to consider.
Yes. The technique is twofold. First, you deploy the phrase with a confident, slightly elevated volume to cut through the audio mix.
And second?
Second, the moment you have secured the floor and they stop speaking, you immediately lower your volume back down to a calm, authoritative pace to make your actual point.
You acknowledge their contribution to save their ego, but you decisively hijack the momentum.
It works beautifully.
Okay, so that's how we handle the chaos of the corporate boardroom. But let's pivot to scenarios where the stress levels are even higher, where there is an extreme, tangible power dynamic at play.
The high-stakes arenas.
Exactly. The two most anxiety-inducing calls known to humanity. The customer service dispute and the phone interview.
These are the crucibles. These are the situations where the theoretical anxiety becomes very real.
Because the outcomes have tangible consequences. Either you get your stolen money refunded, or you secure your dream job.
Let's examine the customer service call first. It often feels like an adversarial negotiation from the exact second the line connects.
It really does. You are calling a massive corporation to demand a fix. What is the strategy for breaking through the wall?
The absolute key to success in a customer service dispute is intense preparation combined with strategic linguistic simplicity.
Preparation meaning having my account number and billing address ready to read off.
That's the baseline. But it goes further. It means having your entire argument cognitively distilled into bullet points before you ever dial the number. You need your exact dates and order numbers written down.
And what do you mean by linguistic simplicity?
You need a simple one-sentence statement of the problem. I was charged twice for the same transaction on Tuesday. You do not launch into a winding 10-minute emotional backstory about how stressed you are.
But wait, if I have a really complex, nuanced issue with my software subscription, my instinct as an advanced English speaker is to use sophisticated, complex vocabulary to explain all the edge cases.
I know you want to prove to the rep that you're intelligent and you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And that instinct is exactly where highly proficient speakers sabotage themselves. The research explicitly warns against this.
Really? Why?
Think about the environment. The representative on the other end is sitting in a chaotic call center, managing high stress, navigating 3 different proprietary computer systems simultaneously.
All while listening to my voice through a compressed headset.
Right. Their cognitive load is just as maxed out as yours. If you hit them with complex subordinate clauses and rare vocabulary, their brain simply drops the information.
So simple is better.
Simple, crystal clear subject-verb-object language is vastly superior to eloquent complexity in this arena. Keep your sentences incredibly short. State the problem. State the desired outcome. The router is broken. I need a replacement ship today.
But getting to a human being to deliver that simple sentence is half the battle. We have to talk about the gatekeepers, IVR systems.
Interactive voice response.
The robotic menus that say press 1 for sales, press 2 to scream into the void. To me, navigating a voice recognition IVR system is like a video game boss battle, where the machine fundamentally cannot understand my accent.
It is incredibly frustrating.
And if I mispronounce a single menu option, it hangs up on me and I have to start the maze all over again.
It's a massive technological hurdle. The speech recognition algorithms running those systems are trained on massive data sets of native accents. If your phonetic delivery falls outside of that specific training data, the algorithm rejects it.
Are there ways around it?
Yes, there are specific cheat codes to bypass this boss battle. First, exercise patience and listen to the entire menu. The option for other issues is almost always the very last one presented.
And second,
utilize the override commands. If the voice recognition is failing to parse your accent, stop trying to play the machine's game. Try repeatedly pressing the 0 key.
just mash 0.
Or clearly and repeatedly enunciate the words operator, representative, or agent. Many of these systems are programmed with a frustration threshold. If they detect repeated failure or hear those key words, they'll automatically route you out of the automated loop and into a human queue.
Okay, let's say the cheat code works. I finally get connected to a human representative, but they're completely unhelpful. They're reading from a script and they refuse to authorize my refund. Is it ever strategically viable to just get angry?
It feels tempting, I know.
Sometimes it feels like righteous, aggressive anger is the only way to break through the corporate stonewalling.
Absolutely not. It is never strategically viable. And the psychology behind why is vital to understand. The representative on the other end did not personally cause your problem.
They're just an employee.
Right. Constrained by a strict corporate script and rigid policies. If you raise your voice, become aggressive, or insult them, you trigger their human defensive instincts. They will immediately utilize every obscure policy in their rulebook to shut you down.
So firm politeness is your ultimate weapon.
Yes.
So what's the tactical move when I hit that brick wall? If I can't get mad, how to get my money back?
You utilize graceful escalation, You acknowledge their constraint and you move past them. You say, I understand that is your specific policy and I know you cannot change it, but this situation has been unacceptable. Could I please speak to your supervisor?
Or I would like to escalate this ticket to a manager.
Exactly. You remain entirely calm, your tone remains measured, but you absolutely refuse to back down. That polite, unyielding firmness is how you win.
Take the emotion out, keep the pressure on. Okay, let's look at the other high-stakes scenario. The phone interview.
Oh, these are tough.
This is terrifying in a completely different way because your entire career trajectory, your livelihood, could hinge on a 20-minute audio interaction with a complete stranger who is actively judging your competence.
The psychology of a phone interview is highly unique. You're attempting to project deep competence, interpersonal warmth, and cultural alignment entirely through the vibrations of your vocal cords.
How do you prepare for that?
The first major paradigm shift the sources offer is to stop treating it like an interrogation and start treating it like an open book test.
An open book test. Meaning, because they can't see my physical environment, I can literally have cheat sheets spread out all over my desk.
Exactly. This is the one immense advantage of the blind audio medium. You should have your resume, the detailed job description, and a highly structured list of your core accomplishments spread out physically in front of you.
I shouldn't read from them verbatim though, right?
Oh, definitely not. Reading a script sounds incredibly robotic and destroys the illusion of fluency, but they act as a vital visual anchor.
So when the adrenaline spikes and my mind inevitably goes blank, my eyes can snap to a bullet point and instantly restart my cognitive engine.
Precisely.
But what happens when the interviewer throws a complete curveball? Let's say I'm looking at my cheat sheets, and the answer to their obscure behavioral question simply isn't there.
That panic sets in.
The silence on a phone line feels so incredibly heavy. My immediate instinct is to just start babbling, to fill the dead air with words, while my brain frantically searches for an answer.
And that nervous babbling almost always leads to a disorganized, rambling, and fundamentally weak answer. Which brings us to a profound insight for managing high-stakes audio. It is completely 100% acceptable to pause.
Really? To just stop talking?
Yes. If you're hit with a complex question, you simply deploy a pacing phrase to buy time. You say, that's a really excellent question. Let me think about that for a moment to give you the best example.
You explicitly narrate that you are thinking, and then just sit in silence.
Yes. You can take 3, 4, even 5 seconds of pure, unbroken silence to mentally outline your 3-point answer. It does not make you look slow or incompetent.
It makes you look thoughtful.
Measured, highly deliberate. It is a sign of immense executive confidence to command the silence, rather than letting the silence command your anxiety.
Commanding the silence, that is a massive perspective shift.
But speaking of things going wrong in these high-stakes moments, what happens when the problem isn't the difficulty of the questions, but the actual technology itself betraying you?
Oh, the audio degrades.
Right. What is the protocol when you're talking to a vital client who has a very heavy, unfamiliar accent, or the cellular connection is dropping packets of audio and you simply cannot understand the words?
This is a critical point of failure for many advanced communicators. The natural instinct, driven by politeness or sheer embarrassment, is to pretend you understand.
Yeah, you nod your head, you say, mm-hmm, and you desperately hope that context will eventually reveal what you missed. The research is utterly adamant on this point. Do not ever pretend to understand. It leads to disastrous, compounding miscommunications.
Especially when numbers or deadlines are involved.
Exactly.
But it feels incredibly rude and aggressive to say, I can't understand your accent or you're speaking too fast. It feels like a direct attack on their competence.
Because you never phrase it as a personal attack. You execute a strategic, face-saving pivot. Sociologically, you want to preserve their dignity while solving your comprehension problems, so you blame the technology.
Oh, you blame the satellite. You blame the cell tower.
Precisely. It's a brilliant sociological mechanism. You say, I am so sorry, the line seems to be breaking up a bit on my end. I'm having trouble hearing the audio clearly. Could you repeat that last metric?
You shift the fault entirely to the inanimate object.
Yes. Or, if it's genuinely an issue of their speaking pace, you politely take the blame upon your own cognitive processing. I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble keeping up with the details. Could you speak just slightly slower for me?
You make it a me problem, not a you problem.
Exactly. Most professionals are happy to accommodate if the request is framed politely. And if the connection is truly abysmal, do not struggle through the misery. Assertively offer to reset the environment. I think we have a severely degraded connection. Should we hang up and try dialing back?
That is incredibly practical. Take the ego out of it. Okay, let's look at the flip side of a bad connection. What happens when there is no connection at all because the person simply doesn't answer the phone?
Ah, the voicemail.
So what does this all mean in the modern era? Honestly, aren't voicemails practically extinct? If I call a friend and they don't pick up, I just hang up immediately and text them. Leaving a voice message feels incredibly archaic.
In our personal lives, yes, the voicemail is largely an endangered species. But the sources draw a massive, crucial distinction here. In corporate English, the voicemail is very much alive.
Really?
Yes. Leaving a crisp, highly structured professional voicemail is a distinct acoustic marker of high competence. It signals that you are organized, you respect business protocols, and you know how to distill information.
Okay, so if I dial a crucial client, it goes to voicemail. I shouldn't just panic, hang up, and send a Slack message. What is the anatomy of the perfect high-competence corporate voicemail?
It's essentially a 30-second micro-performance, and it has 4 strict structural components. 1, clear identification of your full name and company. 2, the explicit single-sentence reason you're calling.
3,
the specific action you need them to take. And 4, your phone number, stated not once, but twice, with specific pacing.
Stated twice. Why? That feels highly redundant. If they have my number on caller ID, why am I reciting it twice?
You have to put yourself in the psychological shoes of the person listening to the message. They are likely multitasking. They're walking to their car or sitting at their desk holding a cup of coffee.
So they aren't ready to write.
Exactly. If you rattle off your 10-digit phone number at the speed of light at the very end of your message, you overwhelm their working memory. They scramble to find a pen, they miss the last 4 digits, and now they have to replay the entire 30-second message.
Ugh, I deeply hate doing that. It is incredibly annoying.
It causes instant friction. The professional pro tip is to hack their working memory. You state your number clearly at the beginning of the message and then reiterate it slowly at the very end.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Blake from Acme. My direct line is 555-0123. I'm calling to follow up.
Right. Could you call me back? Again, my number is 555. Pause. 01 pause 23.
You deliberately pace the digits.
Yes. You must insert micropauses between the clusters of digits to give their brain the necessary milliseconds to process the audio and their hand the physical time to write it down.
It's an act of supreme professional courtesy.
It subconsciously elevates their opinion of you before they even return the call.
Okay, that is brilliant. We're manipulating their working memory to make their life easier. So we've comprehensively covered the structure, the high-stakes arenas, the survival tactics. Let's talk about mastery.
The fun part.
Let's explore how we elevate our speech from merely textbook correct to actually sounding fluid, natural, and rhythmic over a compressed audio line.
This is where we transition from language learners to language masters. We have to transcend the textbook.
Because advanced speakers sometimes sound a bit robotic.
Exactly. Their grammar is mathematically impeccable, but they sound stilted. Why? Because they're speaking a sterilized academic version of the language.
What's the fix?
The research offers a piece of advice here that fundamentally shocks advanced speakers. To sound more native, you actually need to intentionally use fillers and discourse markers.
Wait, you mean words like, well, and you know?
Yes.
We spend years in language classes being aggressively conditioned never to say, teachers literally deduct points for it.
Okay.
And now you're telling us that sprinkling into our sentences is the secret sauce.
This raises an important question about the vast delta between formal written English and spontaneous lived English. In a formal written essay, yes, fillers are detrimental. But in spontaneous, real-time audio communication, native speakers utilize fillers constantly.
They serve a cognitive purpose.
A profound one. What possible purpose could saying, serve? It acts as a highly effective turn-holding mechanism. Imagine you're asked a highly complex analytical question.
Okay.
If you simply sit in dead, unannounced silence for 4 seconds while your brain computes the answer, the other person might think the connection dropped. Or they might try to jump back in and interrupt your thought process.
So the is an acoustic shield.
Exactly. By stretching out a word and saying, "Well, let me look at the data," or deploying a well-placed you are acoustically signaling, my brain is actively processing, the line is not dead, do not interrupt me.
It regulates the traffic of the conversation.
Right. Furthermore, discourse markers like actually, basically, and essentially act as soft signposts. Moderation is key, of course. Emitting an every 3 words sounds unconfident, but utilizing 0 fillers sounds terrifyingly unnatural.
That is a fascinating sociolinguistic hack. What about the actual mechanical, rhythmic sound of the words themselves? English sounds very different from Spanish or French over a phone line.
The sources heavily emphasize 2 mechanical phonetic elements: contractions and stress timing.
Okay, let's start with contractions.
In formal written English, you might type, "I'm gonna call you later." But in spontaneous spoken English, native speakers incessantly smash words together to increase efficiency. "I'm gonna call you later."
You're Evan. Will.
Failing to utilize contractions on a phone call makes you sound incredibly stiff and emotionally distant.
And what about stress timing? I know the underlying rhythm of English is notoriously weird, but how does that actually manifest on a phone call?
English operates on a metronomic beat. Native speakers instinctively emphasize the content words, the nouns, main verbs, and adjectives that carry the actual informational weight.
And they reduce the other words.
Critically, they swallow, compress, or heavily reduce the function words, the prepositions, articles, and auxiliary verbs that just hold the grammar together.
Give me a concrete acoustic example.
Take the simple sentence, "I want to go to the store." A native speaker does not pronounce every single word with equal phonetic weight. They stress the core information: want, go, and store.
So the rhythm becomes, I want to go to the store.
Right. The grammatical glue, the to the, is heavily compressed into a tiny passing schwa sound. It sounds almost like the.
Right, if I pronounce every single syllable perfectly, I want to go to the impressed store. I sound like a malfunctioning robot.
Exactly. If you pronounce every single syllable with perfect clarity on a compressed phone call, you actually exhaust the listener's ear. You force their brain to assign equal importance to every sound.
You have to ride the underlying wave of the content words and let the grammar shrink into the background.
Ride the wave of the content words, yes. And while we're discussing sounding native, we have to touch on some of the fun cultural quirks the sources mentioned, specifically around how we communicate numbers.
Oh, because depending on who you're talking to, a phone number sounds completely different.
It's a massive tell if you get it wrong. The transatlantic number divide. It demonstrates how deeply culture impacts cognitive chunking. In the United States, phone numbers are almost universally read as individual, isolated digits.
551-234.
Right. The only major exception is if there are repeated numbers at the end, an American might say double 5. But generally, it's a steady stream of single units.
But the British chunk the data differently.
Very differently. British English tends to group the digits in pairs or threes, creating a completely different, almost melodic cadence, and they rely heavily on the word double.
So a sequence that an American confidently reads is 4422.
A British person will almost certainly read as 4422.
And they treat the number 0 differently as well, right?
Yes. In British English phone numbers, the digit 0 is almost exclusively pronounced as the letter O. So instead of 078, you will hear 078.
It's these tiny, microscopic sociolinguistic details that immediately signal to the listener whether you are fully embedded in the culture.
Or just reciting phrases from a textbook.
Which leads us perfectly into the final phase of our deep dive today. We know the high-level theory. We have the 5-stage structural map. We know the cultural nuances and the rhythm. But how do we actually practice this in the real world?
Without risking our professional reputations.
Right. What are the fatal, unforced errors we need to actively avoid?
The research outlines several critical, unforced errors that have absolutely nothing to do with your vocabulary, but everything to do with logistical execution. The first fatal error is speaking too quickly.
Let me guess. This goes back to the adrenaline spike we talked about at the beginning.
Exactly. When the phone rings, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Adrenaline spikes, and your speech rate naturally accelerates to match your internal physiological tempo.
You feel like you're speaking normally.
But to the listener, you sound like a frantic auctioneer. You must consciously, deliberately force yourself to slow your pace down by at least 20%.
It's exactly like when you're driving on the highway at 70 miles an hour, and then you take an exit ramp into a residential neighborhood. Going 30 miles an hour feels like you are practically crawling.
But you're actually just going the speed limit. You have to actively recalibrate your internal speedometer. You have to endure the feeling of speaking too slowly to actually speak clearly.
What's a second fatal error?
It's purely logistical, but it destroys professional credibility, ignoring time zones. If you're scheduling an international call, proposing a meeting at 2 p.m. without explicitly specifying the time zone is a recipe for missed connections.
Always attach the time zone, or do the mental math for them.
Yes, propose the time in their local time zone. It is a massive marker of high-level professionalism.
What about the physical environment? We talked about bad cell connections, but what about the actual acoustic noise in the room?
Taking an important business call in a busy, echoing coffee shop with an espresso machine screaming in the background aggressively signals that the conversation isn't valuable to you.
It demonstrates a lack of preparation.
If you're caught completely off guard in a noisy place when the phone rings, it's infinitely better to answer and say, "I apologize. I am currently in a very noisy environment. Can I call you back in exactly 5 minutes from a quiet room?"
You protect the audio environment.
Right.
And what is the final fatal error the sources mentioned? I know this one is absolutely huge for business self-preservation.
Failing to create a paper trail.
Right.
The fundamental nature of a voice call is ephemeral. The words literally vanish into the air the exact millisecond they are spoken. If you negotiate a complex decision on a phone call, it legally and practically does not exist until it is documented.
Because human memory is incredibly fallible.
Exactly. The fatal error is hanging up, feeling great about the conversation, and simply assuming everyone perfectly remembers what was agreed upon. You must bulletproof the interaction by immediately sending a brief follow-up email outlining the action items.
That simple email prevents massive headaches a week later. So how do we practice all of these skills? Building muscle memory so we don't freeze when the phone rings.
I know one suggestion is to record yourself speaking, which is, honestly, psychological torture.
It is pure cringe.
Why does hearing our own voice sound so bad to us?
It's because of the physics of bone conduction. When you speak normally, you hear your own voice resonating through the bones of your skull, which makes it sound deeper and richer to your own ears.
And when we hear a recording,
you're hearing your voice transmitted purely through the air, exactly how everyone else hears it. It sounds thinner, higher, and fundamentally foreign to you.
So our brain rejects it because it doesn't match our self-perception.
Exactly. Nobody likes hearing their own disembodied voice, but pushing past that discomfort is essential because it is the most potent objective feedback loop available.
Because when you speak live, your cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by formulating the next sentence. Right, you have no processing power left to critique what you're saying. When you listen to a recording of yourself leaving a mock voicemail, the flaws become instantly obvious. You have to endure the cringe to extract the data.
What about real-world practice? Talking to a recorder doesn't give you the adrenaline spike of a live human.
The absolute most vital practice mechanism is what the research calls low stakes, real world calls.
Deliberately calling a business where the outcome has zero impact on your life.
Precisely. Call a local restaurant in a foreign city and ask what time their kitchen closes. Call a hardware store and ask if they have a specific hammer in stock.
These interactions last a maximum of 30 seconds.
They have a rigid structure, but crucially, it still triggers that mild sympathetic nervous system response. It inoculates you against the adrenaline spike.
You execute 10 of those, and the phone reverts to being just a piece of plastic again.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this, though, regarding modern technology. We live in the future. Is it cheating to just insist on using video calls? Like, if I have a choice, can I just firmly request a Zoom link so I get my visual crutches back?
It's not cheating in the sense that the goal of business is to get the job done. If you can use video and it reduces your cognitive load, use it. Video is objectively easier for the brain. However,
There's a catch.
true, unshakable linguistic mastery requires completely conquering the voice-only medium, because there will inevitably be situations where the visual crutch is violently ripped away.
A storm drops the internet connection. A client calls you from their car.
If you rely entirely on the visual net of a video call, the pure audio phone call remains a terrifying, unexamined blind spot.
And what about tech cheats during the actual voice call, like using real-time transcription apps?
Leveraging AI technology as a cognitive safety net is actually highly recommended. Many smartphones now offer real-time speech-to-text transcription during a live cellular call.
Like live subtitles for your phone conversation. That seems incredibly helpful for reducing panic.
It is a massive relief valve. Now, the technology isn't infallible. It struggles with accents and jargon, but it provides a visual anchor. If your brain drops a noun due to static, your eyes can dart to the screen to catch the word.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today on our deep dive into the source material. Let's tie all of these psychological and structural strategies together. We started by understanding telephobia as a rational biological reaction to losing our visual crutches.
Right, the McGurk effect.
We revealed the 5-stage structural skeleton that gives us cognitive predictability. We navigated the cultural minefield of small talk, tackling the US versus UK divide. We tackled conference calls with explicit signposting and the micropause interruption.
And we stepped into high-stakes customer service calls and interviews.
Emphasizing simple language, graceful escalation, and the profound power of the strategic pause. We learned to blame the satellite to save face, how to hack working memory for voicemails, and how to actually sound native using fillers and stress timing.
It is a profoundly comprehensive toolkit. And I want to leave you with a final provocative concept to mull over. We've spent this entire time dissecting exactly how difficult the pure audio phone call is.
How it forces your brain to operate at maximum capacity.
But consider the inverse of that equation. Think about what happens to an elite athlete after they spent months training with heavy lead weights strapped to their ankles.
When they take the weights off, they feel like they can fly.
Exactly. If you can dedicate yourself to mastering the immense cognitive heavy lifting required to navigate an advanced, purely audio conversation in a second language, you are fundamentally rewiring and upgrading your brain's processing power.
The ultimate cognitive resistance training.
Once you've conquered the crucible of the disembodied voice, every face-to-face interaction going forward will suddenly feel incredibly light. You will feel like you're playing the game of communication on easy mode.
That shifts the entire paradigm from fear to opportunity. So here's your homework for today. Do not just absorb the theory. Go put the weights on your ankles. Make one low-stakes phone call today. Call a bakery and ask about their muffins.
Just do it.
Test out your new structural map. Walk out onto that purely auditory tightrope and realize that with these strategies, you don't actually need the visual net anymore. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.